Ready to dive into something really useful. We're tackling made to stick today.
It's a fascinating look at why some ideas, they just stick with you, and others, well, they just vanish.
Like trying to remember a jingle from your childhood. Some stick, some don't. So this deep dive is all about cracking that code. What makes an idea memorable? What gives it that staying power?
Exactly. And Made to Stick, it dives deep into that. It's got psychology, a bit of marketing magic, even urban legends thrown in.
Because who doesn't love a good urban legend?
Yeah.
Okay, but before we go down that rabbit hole, let's talk strategy. The book lays out 6 key principles for making ideas stick. And they've even got a handy acronym, because we love those. Successes.
Each chapter tackles one of these principles, and it's not just about selling products or winning arguments, though it can definitely help with that. It's really about communicating any idea effectively.
Whether you're a teacher, a CEO, even just trying to convince your friends to try that new restaurant. So first up, chapter 1. It's all about being simple. And nope, we're not talking about dumbing things down here.
Right. It's about getting to the core of your idea. Think of it like this. JFK's put a man on the moon. That's a pretty simple idea, right?
Way easier to grasp than, say, achieve spacefaring dominance through collaborative innovation.
Exactly. Same goal, but one is clear, concise, impossible to forget. The other, a mouthful.
It's like telling someone make dinner versus make grandma's famous lasagna extra cheese, please. One is vague, open to interpretation, and potential disaster.
Yeah.
The other is a recipe for success.
And that's what the authors call the commander's intent, that clear, actionable directive that cuts through the clutter. They make a great comparison to journalism, that inverted pyramid.
Don't bury the lead. Give me the who, what, where right up front.
Exactly. Give me the meat and potatoes. And a great example they use is this newspaper publisher in North Carolina. The guy was obsessed with local news, right? And his big thing, his mantra for his team was names, names, names.
And it worked, right? I mean, that simple directive, it was like a guiding principle. It shaped their entire approach to news coverage.
For decades.
Okay, so we've talked about keeping it simple. But what about grabbing people's attention in the first place? Chapter 2 dives into that unexpected.
Right, because in a world overflowing with information, noise everywhere, you got to stand out.
It's about breaking the pattern. Like that flight attendant who used humor to spice up a safety announcement, right? People actually paid attention because it was different.
Definitely. Or think about those early 2000s .com ads. They were unexpected for sure, but were they really saying anything meaningful?
Good point. It's got to be more than just a gimmick, right? It's got to connect back to the core of your idea.
Absolutely. A good example is that public service announcement that starts like a typical car commercial, happy family driving along, then bam, sudden unexpected crash.
And then the tagline, didn't see that coming? No one ever does. Buckle up. Always. Chills.
Right. That twist, it makes you pay attention. And the message about buckling up, it hits home because it's directly linked to that element of surprise.
Boom. You're invested now. Okay, so we've covered simple, we've got unexpected. Where do we go from here?
Well, chapter 3 is where things get really interesting. It's all about being concrete.
And this isn't about, literally using concrete. It's about using vivid sensory language, painting a picture with your words.
Like those Aesop's fables we all grew up with. Think about the fox and the grapes. It's such a simple story, but you remember the fox, you remember the grapes, you get the message.
We all want what we can't have. It's human nature.
Exactly. And it stays with you because it's so concrete. You can visualize it. It's not just some abstract idea.
So instead of saying improve customer service, you could say, a Nordstrom employee will iron a customer's shirt for them if they need it while shopping.
Now that's concrete. You can picture it, right? You can almost see that employee with the iron. And it's something we often forget, especially in the business world, where we love our jargon and our abstract ideas.
Oh, tell me about it. It's like we're allergic to plain language sometimes.
Right. But Made to Stick, it argues that being concrete, it's crucial. It's what makes your ideas understandable and memorable. So much easier to grasp onto something tangible than some vague concept.
Okay, so we've got simple, unexpected, and concrete down. What comes next in our quest to make ideas stick?
Well, it's one thing to have an idea that's catchy and memorable, but it also needs to be believable. Which brings us to chapter 4, credible. It's like that old saying, right? Seeing is believing. And this chapter is all about giving your audience that proof, that evidence they need to really buy into your idea.
And they've got some really interesting ways to do that,
Yeah.
like using vivid details or statistics. Those can be really powerful if you use them right.
Right, because numbers can be boring. And they talk about the power of testimonials, too, letting someone else sing your praises. But sometimes, they say, the best way to build credibility is through what they call anti-authorities. Sounds kind of counterintuitive, right?
It does. So what is an anti-authority exactly?
Well, they give this great example about a campaign to curb teen smoking. Instead of putting doctors and scientists front and center, they found this 16-year-old girl. Her name was Pam Laffin, and she was a chain smoker.
Wow, okay, so the complete opposite of what you'd expect.
Exactly. But because of that, because it was so unexpected, people paid attention. And her experience, her firsthand struggles with smoking, it gave her message this rawness, this authenticity that a doctor in a white coat just couldn't match.
Like you wouldn't expect a teenager to be the poster child for quitting smoking, but that's what makes you listen, right?
Exactly. It disrupts your expectations. And then they share this other story about these two scientists who were basically laughed at for their research. They were trying to prove that bacteria, not stress, caused stomach ulcers.
Oh, I remember reading about this. It was a pretty radical idea at the time.
It was, and no one believed them.
So what did they do?
Well, to prove their point, one of them actually drank a beaker full of the bacteria.
Talk about dedication to your research.
Right. I mean, it was risky, for sure, but it definitely proved their point. It's an extreme example, but it shows how far you might have to go to make your idea credible.
It's like the ultimate science fair project. It makes me think of those infomercials where they're trying to tell you a cleaning product and they spill grape juice on white carpet. Like, don't worry, watch this.
Exactly. It's about showing, not just telling. And another big part of credibility is using statistics effectively, which honestly a lot of people get wrong.
Oh, I know what you mean. It's like you can throw a big number at me, but if it's not in context, it doesn't really mean anything.
Right, like saying a billion snowflakes fell in a blizzard. Okay, and
Exactly.
they give a good example of how to frame statistics in a way that makes sense. Instead of saying the U.S. defense budget is enormous, which, yeah, no kidding, they compare it to something relatable. They say it's roughly the size of the combined economies of Switzerland, Austria, and Belgium.
Okay, suddenly that number has some weight to it. I can actually wrap my head around that.
Exactly. It's about finding those comparisons that help your audience grasp the magnitude of the information.
So we've talked about making it believable, making it credible, but we also have to make people care, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where chapter 5 comes in, emotional.
This is where it gets really interesting, I think. This chapter dives into the psychology of persuasion. Because the truth is, we like to think we make decisions based on logic, but...
But we're emotional creatures at our core, right?
Exactly. Think about it. How often do you make a decision, big or small, based solely on cold, hard logic?
Honestly, not that often. Our emotions usually play a big role.
Right. And this chapter is all about how to tap into those emotions in a way that's ethical and effective. They talk about appealing to people's self-interest, for example, or their identities, their aspirations.
So it's not just about tugging at heartstrings. It's about understanding what really motivates people.
Exactly. They highlight this study where researchers tested two different fundraising letters. One focused on the statistics of poverty, all the numbers and figures. Right. The other one told the story of a single child in need.
I think I know where this is going.
The one with the personal story was way more effective.
Of course.
Yeah.
We connect with stories, right? We connect with faces and names much more than we do with numbers on a page.
Exactly. It's the difference between reading a news article about a famine and seeing a photo of a single child who's starving. That image, it stays with you.
Absolutely. Speaking of stories, that brings us to the final principle of made to stick, which is chapter 6, stories.
Because everyone loves a good story, right?
Yeah.
But this chapter argues that stories, they're not just entertaining, they're essential for making ideas stick.
It's like that saying, people might not remember what you said, but they'll always remember how you made them feel.
Exactly. And stories have this power to evoke those emotions, to create a connection with the audience.
They're memorable, they make us feel things, but how do they actually help our ideas stick?
Well, one way is that they act as a kind of mental simulation. They give us a chance to rehearse for the future, in a way. They give us these what-if scenarios that we can play out in our minds.
So it's like a flight simulator for our brains.
Exactly. They use this example of a Xerox repairman who told his buddies a story about this really tricky repair job he had. And it wasn't just gossip. It was a way for the other repairmen to learn from his experience. By listening to his story, they could mentally rehearse how they would handle a similar situation.
So instead of just reading a manual about how to fix a copier, they're getting this vivid first-person account.
Right. It brings the information to life. It's more engaging, it's more memorable, and it's much more likely to actually be used. It's like the difference between reading about a travel destination and actually hearing someone tell you about their trip.
Oh, absolutely. A story just brings it to life in a way that a travel brochure never could.
Exactly. Stories give information context, they engage our emotions, and that helps us connect with the message on a much deeper level.
So, okay, we've covered a lot of ground here. Simple, unexpected, concrete, credible, emotional stories. Those are our 6 principles. But how do we actually put all of this together? Like, how do we take these principles and use them to, create our own sticky ideas?
Well, the book's got a ton of great advice on that, but one of the biggest takeaways for me is think of these principles like tools in a toolbox. You're not going to use all of them for every single idea, right? You
Right?
got to pick the right tool for the job.
So it's not about following some rigid formula. It's about understanding the principles
Right.
and, applying them strategically.
Exactly. It's like cooking.
Yeah.
You need to know what each ingredient does, how they work together,
Ooh, I like that analogy.
right, to make something delicious.
So, okay, let's say I'm trying to pitch a new product idea to investors. How do I make that pitch stick?
Well, you got to nail that commander's intent first.
Yeah.
What's the one key message you want those investors to walk away with?
Okay, so distill it down to its essence,
Yep.
and then what?
Then you think, how can I make this unexpected? How can you disrupt their expectations, make them really sit up and take notice?
Oh, okay. Okay, so maybe start with a provocative question
Yeah.
or surprising statistic, something that really challenges their assumptions about, the
Okay.
market.
Exactly, something they weren't expecting.
Yeah.
And then you can bring in that concrete principle we talked about. Paint a vivid picture. What problem does your product solve, and how does it do it better than anything else out there?
Oh, and I could even use a prop or a demo, really bring it to life.
Exactly. Make them see it, feel it, almost taste it.
Ooh, I love that.
Right. Engage all the senses. And don't forget about credibility.
Right.
How can you back up your claims? Data, testimonials.
Probably, yeah, those are always powerful.
Right. You got to show them that this is the real deal.
And what about the emotional principle? I got to make those investors care about this product, right?
Absolutely. Think about their motivations. What are they looking for? Big return on their investment. Are they passionate about solving a particular problem?
Okay, so I got to connect my product to their aspirations.
Their values, their goals, yeah.
And then last but not least, stories.
Ah, yes. The power of story. Never underestimate it.
So instead of just, listing features and benefits, I could tell them a story about a customer whose life was changed by this product.
Now you're talking. Because remember, stories, they're emotional. They stick with us. They help people connect with your message on a deeper level.
Wow, this has been amazing. I feel like I have a whole new toolkit now for making my ideas stick.
And that's the beauty of Made to Stick. It really is. It's practical, it's actionable, and anyone can use it.
Whether you're pitching a product, teaching a class, even just trying to, win an argument with your family, remember those success principles.
They're your secret weapon.
I love it. All right, thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
We'll catch you next time.